My name is Lisa Beckham, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. If you have any further questions about this webinar or other programs that we offer, our contact information will be on the last slide of this presentation. There are some logistical items I'd like to address before we begin. I ask that you please submit your questions throughout the webinar so we can address them during the Q&A portion in the last 5 minutes of this presentation. To submit your questions, select the Q&A button in the bottom middle of the screen, type your question, and please send, or press send. You can see the Q&A button in the bottom middle of your screen and the send button at the bottom as well. There's also live captioning available for viewing towards the bottom of the screen. We will send an email in the next few days with a link to the recording of the webinar. The link will be sent to the email address that you submitted during registration. I'd like to introduce the topic for today's webinar, Strategies for Working Remotely. The current global health and economic upheaval in transforming our work and personal lives in the ways we couldn't have imagined even a few months ago. Fortunately, we will live in a time where technology connects many of us better than ever before. However, managing and contributing to a high-performing virtual team requires complex skills beyond logging in, skills you can learn and implement now. It is a privilege to introduce Karin Goettsch. Karin Goettsch designs research-based strategic talent and organizational development solutions for prominent clients across industries and sectors. She consults and coaches on leadership, team building, effective communication, and other core topics, and specializes in intercultural communication on global virtual teams. Welcome, Karin.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm very happy to be here today to talk about this very timely topic of better remote working. And while I wish I had the chance to interact with all of you, I can guess that our large group covers many different job levels and functions and vastly different experiences in working remotely. Virtual work is not new for everyone. However, it is definitely having its moment. I became intrigued by the bigger issues of global virtual teams with my dissertation research here at the University of Minnesota. After working at many global companies, I experienced firsthand many of the challenges around language, culture, technology, and collaboration. And I was fortunate to interview 50 professionals around the world. Now, with the increasing amount of tools that we have many years later, an organization doesn't have to be large or multinational to be a successful remote company. As exciting as it is, it also highlights the many layers of complexity in moving online. Today, we'll scratch the surface on some of the most important issues. The first two I consider to be some of the foundational pieces of building a strong remote team, the cake, if you will, in this high-level discussion. And those are addressing some of the myths about remote work arrangements and creating accountability and performance expectations. These next two also have essential components, but I see them as potentially icing on the cake. Excelling at these two can really up your game in the virtual space. They are engaging employees with a sense of belonging and collaboration, and taking advantage of expanded career development opportunities in this area. My goal today is to dig a bit deeper into some points that you maybe haven't thought about. For those of you who are brand new to remote work, there are many resources available to get you started. For example, Zoom is sending out many communications now. However, no matter how long you've been working remotely, we can all get a kick out of something like this that went viral when a manager somehow turned herself into a potato with a snap camera filter. Many of us probably have been in a similar situation as these employees who are obviously trying not to laugh. If you haven't seen it, Google it for a good laugh. Okay, let's get started. It goes without saying that we're in a period of sudden, relentless, and yes, unprecedented change. We've talked about managing change over many decades with many different models, and even coined a phrase, living in a VUCA world. The acronym VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. There's no doubt we're living in a VUCA world right now. Many of us might agree that our more traditional concept of change with its predictability is looking pretty good about now. We could handle that. But this is more of our reality. Today's reconfigured, fast-changing environment seems very relevant, as shown in this somewhat disconcerting graphic. But rather than increase your anxiety, hopefully this validates what you and others around you might be feeling and thinking. And to think, this goes far beyond our work environment. But for today's focus, it serves its purpose to remind us of where we're at. To set the stage, I wanted to provide some of the recent research that is available around remote work. As you might imagine, there are many different estimates and breakdowns, so I've selected just a snapshot of the most recent for you. Well, maybe more than just a few. As we mentioned, you will get access to the slides, so I wanted to include more content than we'll be able to fully cover today. It goes without saying that what today looks like will look nothing like tomorrow. So let's take a look. Some takeaways here on growth. Remote work is growing exponentially with an estimate of 8 million US workers in some capacity, roughly up 400% in the past decade. Notice also that there is significant appeal of working remotely among employees, although we acknowledge that not everybody has the option unless they're under a mandated work from home situation, such as the current time. And nearly all, 99% of the people in this survey would want to try remote work if they could, if it was available to them. Regarding productivity and cost, business listens to numbers and data more than ever. So here are a few insights into productivity and cost for remote work. Notice that these are employees self-reporting, but they said that 1/2 of them work more hours at home than in a traditional office. 3/4 of them say they're more productive and more content to stay at their job and their company. And 80% are less stressed by their job. Also, someone has tried to quantify the savings for each remote worker, and one figure clocks in at $11,000 annually per half-timer. This includes saving on office space, for example. And in the next part of our talk, we'll look at some myths around productivity. Finally, some challenges around remote teams. These are results from one particular study. Working remotely as a team is not surprisingly challenging. It has its own challenges online. One study found training and support for team members and leaders in particular to be lacking, with less than 1/4 getting any training as they venture into this domain. Unfortunately, they may not know what they don't know. There are significant challenges that impact remote teams, the primary one being effective communication, as you can see. Just a sample of other challenges noted here include time zones, culture and language, trust, team building, and accessibility. And we'll touch on a few of these too. So we have unpredictable, unrelenting change. We have social distancing, bringing so many more people suddenly into an unfamiliar remote environment. And we have unclear economic and employment situations. There is indeed a lot at stake. For those of you who have been working remotely for a while, you'll agree that there are a surprising number of differences in a remote environment, almost like comparing apples to oranges. Can you operate the same way virtually and match or exceed the same results? You may be able to, especially if you are a strong employee or a strong leader in general. Or you may not get the same results if you have some blind spots regarding the factors needed for truly high-performing remote teams, such as accountability, engagement, collaboration, and talent development. All of these are our focus today. There are many strategies that can boost that chance for you to succeed, starting with awareness. These strategies will help you peel away some of the nuances in comparing your traditional Apple team to your new virtual orange team. You may be surprised at what you discover. Okay, I think that's enough fruit analogy to make the point. Let's move on to the strategies. We'll start with some myths about remote work arrangements. These myths are out there, sometimes articulated loudly, sometimes existing in thought bubbles above our heads. With some awareness and action, most concerns can be minimized or disproven. This assumes we're talking about positions that typically would lend themselves to remote working arrangements, and it's true that not all positions do. For each of the strategy slides going forward, I've divided them into tips for individuals and tips for managers, although there is some slight overlap at times. Managers, you know you're wearing multiple hats, so please do consider both sides. And those of you who are individual contributors might think of a future manager role that you might hold, or you can evaluate whether your current manager has these down. So from an individual person's perspective, the first two myths deal with lack of trust with their manager and with their coworkers. Strong interpersonal relationships can provide a foundation to build on when communication changes online. The third bullet may be true, that you may become lonelier online, especially in this particularly isolating time that we find ourselves in. So it's important for the employee to know their personality and the need for interaction and deeper connections. There is a risk of out of sight, out of mind for many of these, but an employee who is worried about losing network opportunities and perhaps stalling their career can be proactive to reach out to others, including professional groups who are interested in the same networking. Finally, what everyone is looking for, the elusive work-life balance. This myth is actually a positive one, but unfortunately, it may be a surprise that the balance doesn't come as easily as you might think. One of the most cited challenges of working remotely is setting clear boundaries on your work hours so that the lines don't blur between work and home time. Again, this can be dependent on someone's life situation and personality as well. Now, we all know what some managers are thinking, right? Taking advantage, being absent, goofing around. These are all trust issues. Managers can think about how and why working relationships and ethics would suddenly change in a new environment and be aware of that bias that they may hold. It might also help to remember that really, employees are texting, Instagramming, and snacking in the office kitchen more than you know, or as much as you might be if you're really honest with yourself. If you're worried about losing control of your team, you might need to step back and reflect on your leadership style. How much control do you need to have, and what are you missing out on in that regard? The last one, again, seems like a win, but it's rarely true if you understand that you need to make yourself more visible for your team. You may very well spend more time and more energy in managing a remote workforce. We've all been there when we've had to jump on a call at a less than convenient time or place, but these are quite extreme examples on this slide. And I'm sure that there are a few good stories and quite possibly some valid explanations. It would be fun to hear some of yours as well if we had the chance to discuss. This is a good lead in to our next topic of accountability and performance expectations. So let's take a look at some strategies for individuals. Have you ever thought intentionally about how to hold yourself accountable before working remotely? Maybe not. So consider this an opportunity to think about what you can bring to the virtual table and hold yourself to it. Think about how you will plan, how you will communicate, how you will manage your time. Committing to honest communication with your manager and coworkers will help head off any misunderstandings, and you'll be seen as responsive and accessible, even when you're not regularly seen as usual. Keep detailed notes and questions about your work progress and engage fully with your manager during one-on-one discussions. If you know that you struggle with flexibility and ambiguity, make note of small victories. It can be harder to feel like you're getting all the right info at the right time without surprises. So this is one strategy to feel like you have things under a little bit of control. Finally, remember to be kind to yourself. You're in a learning curve, and life is different right now in many ways. So cut yourself some slack when you're going online. Just don't fall into bad habits that might derail your good progress. Now for managers, set very clear expectations early on. Clarity can be in the eye of the beholder, but most important in a remote environment is confirming from the beginning that everyone is clear on their goals and expectations so that they can execute. Not to say that these goals are rigid and won't be changed later. Be sure to schedule and, most importantly, follow through on regular and frequent one-on-one meetings with your direct reports. The key is to get these on the calendar, however brief or however long they are, and make them a priority. They are for your employees' engagement. The same holds true for regular, frequent team meetings. It's a different group dynamic and needs care and feeding as well. Another way to solidify the team is to co-create the team norms, taking into account their remote challenges and needs. Keep focused on short-term and long-term goals for your team. Now, goals often change, but they do serve as a rudder to ground your employees, especially when they be more independent as remote workers. You may want to consult with HR or other leadership to discuss if performance management, the process may change during a time of transition. So for example, will you still be holding formal reviews, mid-year annual reviews? Will you replace those with more frequent conversations? Will you pause performance reviews altogether, for example, during this current stay-at-home period? Any clarification that you can get will be much appreciated by your team and also yourself. Finally, ask your employees for their feedback and their input. This complements all of the other opportunities to engage them and get their buy-in on how the remote team wants to operate. So in other words, what's going well, what isn't going well for them, what new ideas do they have? Get them involved, get them engaged. There will be issues that arise online, just as in face-to-face work. And even the best engineered team will run into some speed bumps, especially in a remote environment where you have fewer connections and also where emotions may be charged and running high, such as during a time of great transition. Your best bet is to resolve an issue by taking advantage of the distance and pausing not avoiding, but pausing to consider what remote and situational factors are coming into play with a particular issue or disagreement so that you are better able to respond. And this applies to both individual contributors and managers, because we know that interpersonal relationships and potential conflict crosses all boundaries. One easy to remember formula is the following. Pay attention to your gut, your intuition. This focuses on how you yourself identify your interests and emotions in the moment. Second is paying attention to your heart. This is tapping into your emotional intelligence, and you will turn your attention to the other person and use empathy to put yourself in their shoes. Finally, paying attention to your mind. This is an opportunity to tap into reason and logic, to analyze the situation and what some possible outcomes might be. We tend to favor one or more of these instincts. The value is learning to balance and explore all of these angles when communication might be challenging in a remote environment. It also requires some more preparation on your part. Sometimes we have that opportunity to step away. Sometimes it can be more challenging without visual cues if you don't have access to video. But here are some possible relevant questions to consider. What has been communicated? To whom? By whom? When? Was anyone left out? Is lack of communication leading to this issue? Is this person struggling with the virtual tools and therefore not fully participating in the meetings? What else is happening in this person's life right now that I know about? Finally, what team dynamics am I noticing and how can I learn more? These are not the only questions to consider, but it gives you an idea of the range. So remote accountability and performance management does require some additional thought and reflection. Now we're moving to the place that can dramatically impact someone's remote work experience. In keeping with one of today's threads, ideally all teams need engaged employees who feel that they belong and that they are fully contributing. This is amplified in a virtual environment, and it can also be a game-changing opportunity. It's the tricky yet rewarding part when it does work. So listed here are some key factors that can impact, for better or for worse, how employees fit in. We've mentioned how important trust and communication are in setting the stage. A related factor is purpose and meaning. This can refer to the team's goals, such as the reason for bringing the team together in the first place, but also more importantly here is the individual employee's sense of purpose and meaning. In other words, how they see themselves belonging and staying engaged. Feeling connected and motivated will serve to boost their confidence and their feeling of empowerment if they are trusted to move ahead. Most employees will appreciate some form of acknowledgement, some more visible than others, and recognition can take multiple forms. The last two bullets, global mindset and diversity and inclusion, highlight the cohesiveness of a group that understands the value of different perspectives. As the bottom statistics show, remote employees tend to be happier than on-site employees. And when they're engaged, these employees are 21% more productive than disengaged employees. Now that's great news, especially when overall employee engagement rates have struggled over time. But we can't assume that this engagement and collaboration is automatic. So here are some strategies to boost that engagement, sense of belonging, and collaboration. Many of them have to do with putting yourself out there, being transparent, being human. Sometimes it means calling out the elephant in the room. For individuals, some strategies are: take moments to recalibrate physically, mentally, and emotionally. Self-care will make you happier, healthier, and ready to face anything. Try jotting down 3 good things that happen each day. What and who you are grateful for. This is something that you can do on your phone, on a notepad, at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, whatever appeals to you. Connect with coworkers and friends across the organization just because. Maybe it's to tell them that they made your gratitude list that day. Get comfortable turning on your video. While it is not a complete substitute for face-to-face, video does add value, especially in smaller groups. Also, make a contribution or take a risk during a conversation or during a meeting. What do you have to lose if you put yourself out there? Create shared stories over time. Think of how you and your coworkers will look back on this time and how you came together to make it through. Volunteer to lead part or all of a meeting. Offer to bring something new, show a new side of your personality. Log in early to be present and ready when it is possible. It takes longer than you think, and people will notice, although we are letting things slide, of course, in these early days of our stay-at-home mandate. Participate in small talk and icebreakers. This is an often overlooked valuable part of virtual team building. In this culture in particular, too often we want to get straight to the point, and we want to end calls early as a reward. How many times do you hear, I'm going to give you the gift of 5 minutes back in your schedule today? Use that time for something as equally valuable, and that's been shown by research to create better engagement and collaboration. Call your colleagues by their names and remember small things that you learn about them. Names are especially important for larger groups where you might be just getting to know people. You can remember their birthdays, their special events, or a particular situation that they're going through. And finally, try laughter, positivity, and optimism to create energy and motivate others. It really is contagious, and it's so often appreciated when done at the right time. So what about managers? Some suggestions here. Hold initial face-to-face meetings with the team whenever possible. Now, of course, whenever possible means when you are able to actually physically get together. There is plenty of research showing that it is the best thing you can do. If not just initially, maybe consider also quarterly or at the end of a project. It captures moments of informal connectiveness that can't be replicated online. Also, acknowledge the strangeness of the new normal. I was thinking, hopefully in X number of months, I'll be able to remove this bullet point from the slide, but again, the new normal may be the new normal, and we may not ever get over the current situation, or it may just look different. Check in informally outside of your regularly scheduled meetings. You'll learn much more on the side, especially with a larger team where you're maybe not in frequent contact. You'll get to learn different personality styles, different communication styles, different cultural styles, and you'll appreciate learning how people work differently and how they prefer to engage. Try to over-communicate. It's really difficult to do, so you don't have to worry about it. But especially with remote employees, they need to see and hear things many more times for it to click. You don't have those water cooler conversations, those hallway conversations where you can catch up and reconfirm. Be as transparent as you can with your communication. A great way to build trust with the team, if you can't share something, is to be honest about it. They'll respect you. Remote teams need to feel confident that they'll get the pertinent information that they need in a timely way. And they'll understand if you can't share. Recognize moments big and small. Again, connect with individuals about their preference. Do they prefer quiet recognition or loud recognition? But do it no matter what. Even a simple thank you or a note is meaningful and, of course, budget friendly. Be a role model for the ideal tone that you want to see in team meetings and other interactions. Employees watch and listen to their leaders during tough times, so be fully aware of that. Be inclusive and give all participants a voice. Acknowledge and draw on all of the different perspectives, personalities, expertise, cultures, and experiences on the team. It'll make it a richer experience and enhance the engagement of everyone. Carve out the beginning of meetings for non-business roundtable greetings and sharing. It's a part of creating a sense of belonging and social connection, and it's where those shared stories come into play. It is not a waste of time. Use tools such as breakout rooms or whiteboards for smaller group brainstorming. Tools such as Zoom and WebEx offer ways to do this, to recreate the collaborative experience online. And then finally, show empathy, understanding, and your own vulnerability. Draw on your critical emotional intelligence and just be human. We've reached the fourth set of strategies, and this is a topic that can be overlooked in remote team discussions. And so I think it's important to share today. It's the rest of the icing on this cake, or maybe it's the candles. How can you take advantage of some thinking and doing time to explore career development related to remote work or other potential paths involving virtual resources, especially when you're learning all of this on the fly? So some strategies for individuals. Focus on learning agility. That might involve tech skills, soft skills, how to influence people, tapping into your curiosity. Agility is the new buzzword, and especially learning agility. So how can you jumpstart your learning of new valuable skills as they arise? Become an expert on virtual teaming and find new collaboration tools to share. Do you have experience in virtual teaming? Or do you have a knack for it that you want to share with others? Do you like the tech side? Can you be the go-to person on your team? Make your interests known. Don't wait for others to notice or ask you to be on a project. Make it known. People appreciate extra help from motivated coworkers who want to grow. They want to help you. Show up. You can own your career. What excites you in this virtual space? Make sure you're 100% engaged, and think of your online presence and your employee brand online as well. Update your career development plan for discussions with your manager. You don't have a career development plan? Google, you'll find a simple template and share that with your manager. Consider building a portfolio career. Think longer term and about what other skills you have to offer. This could be a side gig, could involve teaching, various creative outlets. How about a specialty in remote work? Expand your virtual networking. Look through your LinkedIn list. Contact professional associations. Many people have more time now for online networking, both one-on-one and in groups. Find a mentor. Who have you wanted to talk to and learn from outside of your usual circle? Is there a remote team leader that you know or would like to know? Is there somebody in a different region or country? Consider coaching. If you find yourself stuck, consider working with a coach to help you discover and clarify your ideas and aspirations around different career path or how to operate more successfully in a virtual environment. Managers, lots of ideas for you too. So one important thing to keep your eye on is reskilling and upskilling the talent on your team to include more tailored remote work competencies. Some of these we've talked about already today. How is communication different in a virtual space? Collaboration, global perspective, time management, new technologies. Think of your employees that you might risk losing, and also which future employees, future needs your team might have. Identify and develop emerging leaders. Think of who shows potential in these different environments and would be someone to tap into now. Prioritize career development discussions with your direct reports. Schedule them separately from performance discussions. Focus only on development. If you don't get those scheduled and your direct reports follow my other advice, they may be reaching out to you to get those on the calendar. Think strategically about how to help your team and your organization. So what remote policies are needed or need to be revised? Is there any feedback you can offer from your experiences? What success stories are you hearing about that would be of benefit to the larger organization? Become a go-to person in this space. Related to that, become a skilled virtual team leader yourself. Dig into this role some more, or even consider nominating a co-lead to handle some of the logistics and idea generation on your team meetings. And then finally, benchmark remote trends with your network. Reach out to keep your network fresh and also learn what's going on with remote work elsewhere. Now, there's a lot here, so think about dynamic changes and the resulting development opportunities as career insurance for you. Find a part of remote teaming that interests you and explore it further. So I've given you many ideas on how to take action on your own career during this unique time. Here are a couple of takeaways. First, redirect your energies during this challenging time. Is your glass usually half empty or half full? Does it need a little boost right about now? And who can you get that from? Also, who can you help in return? Second, flex your creativity, innovation, and action mindset. Organizations are going to be looking for people who are ready to step up and jump into virtual environments. Is this your time to shine? Third, remember there are varied remote learning opportunities and resources of all types and costs. One model is called 70-20-10. And this model tells us that approximately 70% of our learning comes from experiences that we have. These can be on the job, taking on new roles, or new projects. I'm sure you can think of significant learning that you've had in your career that fits in here. Sometimes most of our powerful experiences come from something we learned on the fly. Approximately 20% of our learning comes through others. Conversations with your manager, coworkers, a mentor, a coach, your network, your family, someone in your community. And 10% comes from formal learning. This key foundational piece can be classes, webinars, books, online resources, simply what you're doing today. You are investing in yourself. And finally, the two statistics at the bottom highlight the return for organizations that invest in their employees. So there is significant revenue gained per employee and also savings by reskilling versus losing and replacing employees. It's quite a significant amount. Forward-thinking companies will need to continue to invest in their talent and finding those who are comfortable working in different environments and can add value. So once again, think about looking beyond your work today, what needs to get done and how you're doing it, into what are some future opportunities. Keep your eyes wide open, express your interest in learning different things in this space. So to wrap up, the simplest question, what's next, doesn't have an answer, I don't believe, at least not yet. So my parting thoughts for you: first, don't get too comfortable. Enjoy the ride, but be sure to buckle up. Second, keep building your resilience so that you can adapt, learn, and bounce back. Now is the time to be as strong and focused as you can be as you're navigating these remote adventures. And if you want to accept the challenge, I have two bigger questions for you to ask yourself and your remote team. The first is, how can we use this time, this gift of time, to experiment and help define what the next era of work and leadership will look like? Once we get past these initial challenges, we'll want to be taking a look at what's ahead. How are things different? Are we throwing the playbook out the window? Are we starting over? How can you be part of that conversation? And secondly, how can successful remote collaboration be a catalyst for better things ahead? We know that remote work can be clunky at times. As we've talked about today, there are many challenges, but with time, with effort, with learning from others, there is definite improvement that's possible. So keep your mind on the positive aspects of it. In other words, I would want you to answer, what's next for you and your organization? So thinking back to our earlier change curve slide, we know it will continue at an unpredictable rate and pattern. No going back on that, I think. The good news, I believe, is that both technology and human connections will be a part of the solution. We have a conversation going on in our society about digital transformation, about artificial intelligence, and the impacts on the world of work as we know it. I think one thing that we've seen with our social distancing is the importance of connecting with each other as humans, whether it's online, whether it's singing on balconies, via social media around the globe, wherever. So I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. If you're interested in more on related topics we touched on, please check out the CCAP's website for the class schedule. This summer, I'll be teaching online 3 courses: Communicating Across Cultures, Emotional Intelligence, and Strategic Talent Management. We are also planning to offer a new expanded version of this remote work webinar topic, and we definitely welcome your participation to contribute and to dig deeper into some of these questions. So thank you very much. And Lisa, I'd like to turn it over to you for some questions and closure.
Thank you so much, Karin, for imparting your wisdom on this topic. I don't know about you, but I'm going to start singing from balconies as you recommended. So I do have a couple of questions, 3 of them. The first one is there any data on how the cost savings and boost in productivity and working from home is affected by ripple effects of the stay-at-home order, such as childcare being unavailable and the need to facilitate distance learning?
That's a fantastic question. Obviously, there isn't a lot of data directly corresponding to what we're going through right now. It's too soon for that, but the area is ripe for examination. Because as you said, all of the research that has been done to date has been done around companies that are either set up as remote companies or they're thinking more progressively about offering their employees remote work because it works for them. It works within their company strategy. It works for the employees. And not all employees want to work virtually. We had said before that, the vast majority would like to try it, but that doesn't mean 5 days a week. That might mean 1 day a week or part-time in another way. So this idea of other costs that we need to investigate, such as childcare and having to upskill and spend time, I think about the school districts in particular and how these teachers have risen to the occasion and the parents have risen to the occasion, right? To move everything instantly online, something that we have been doing slowly in the corporate world over many, many years. So I know I don't have an exact answer for you right now, but I acknowledge the question and the need for further research on this. And I welcome that challenge, and I know that there will be many of other people across different disciplines as well. Obviously, you've picked up that my background comes more from the learning and development, the HR space, but we know that there are many other disciplines, even within the university here, that will be looking at some of those important questions.
Great,
And I should say, I encourage you to reach out too. I had my email on the previous slide and on the cover slide as well. So if you'd like to follow up with me, please reach out and do that.
yeah, thank you, Karen, for that amazing answer. The next question I have is, how do we facilitate engagement and belonging when the threats of budget cuts and layoffs loom, especially in our specific situation here with COVID and the university?
Right. So it is a challenge, there's no doubt. So some of the strategies I had presented to you do have to do with that emotional intelligence side. We talk about showing empathy, we talk about, um, being concerned for others. Now, a lot of those strategies do not cost anything per se, but they do require a commitment from managers and from peers as well to involve yourself emotionally in what's going on. We all are carrying a lot right now on our shoulders. And sometimes this idea of having to reach out and connect in those very personal ways with other people may feel like it's too much to handle. So it's an excellent point, and it's a reason to consider your own resilience. We mentioned that earlier. How much can you handle at a given time? Take a pulse check of your own energy. Where are you at? When are you tapped out? When do you need to back away? And be honest with people. So we talked about the importance of transparency. Ideally, everybody would show up positive, sharing good news about their personal lives, their professional lives. We'd connect on multiple levels. That may not happen every time, and people should feel free to share that, managers and employees alike. Did I answer all of that question for you, Lisa, or is there another part to it?
Yes, you answered it perfectly. Yes. And then I have one or maybe two. We might have time for two more questions. The second to last question would be, what are some tips for encouraging engagement and participation during team meetings? It seems like less people are willing to speak up on virtual meetings.
Yeah. So I think if you go back and take a look at some of the strategies, you might be able to find some that will work with your particular organizational culture. And I've done a lot of work in this area of global teams. We talk about the layered cultures. So not only do we have some national cultures when you're working with people outside of the country or interculturally within our own country, but you also have organizational cultures, especially for those of you from the university. You think about how many diverse functional cultures you have, organizational cultures. Everybody acts a different way. You're initiated into the culture of your department. And some tips will simply not work for your group, and that's okay. There's no one ideal recipe for how to pull together an engaged team. However, there are some simple tricks, I think. I'll call them strategies rather than tricks. One of them was back to setting expectations. So the manager should really start to role model what is expected and why. Now, that doesn't have to be the control issue again. That's where the other strategy of co-creating team norms comes in. So this is not one person's team. This is a group of members. We want to figure out how we work best together. There may be people that have certain strengths in facilitating. Maybe they want to take over the meeting. There may be certain people who really like the idea of small talk and icebreakers. I know some people don't. There's value in sharing certain things, but how do you create, how do you request a volunteer to put together that first 5 minutes, 10 minutes of a roundtable discussion? How can you come up with something fun, something non-intimidating for people to participate in? Set the expectation that your voice will be heard. We'll ask everybody at least once at the beginning of the call and the end of the call to contribute. If you're in a team situation where there may be some language challenges, there are a myriad of ways to accommodate those as well. And some of that is done by the virtual tools. So in this case, I can't see if anybody is chatting, but chat is a fantastic way to make your presence known, to contribute, but not have to open up your mic and speak. You can get clarification. You can slow down the conversation a little bit. You can connect with people who have common interests that you may not have known before. So chat is a great way to do that. Raising your hands in a meeting, just finding ways that people feel comfortable. Start small, build bigger. Also be careful not to let some people dominate the conversation, because that can happen, I think, a little bit easier in a virtual space than in person, where you have more of the visual, right? And if you can see that somebody wants to speak up, but maybe isn't just taking that opportunity, a team leader can call on that person. Uh, and there are many other ideas too. I mentioned reaching out to people before and after meetings. Don't just think that, my virtual team leading is just showing up for this 1 hour check-in. Reach out to people individually. Find out how they like to communicate. You may find that people want pre-reads ahead of time. Again, getting back to the issue of, are there different languages considerations that we need to accommodate? Sometimes people want to have various modalities. They want to see something in writing before the meeting, and then they want to listen on the call or the webinar to solidify their understanding. Other cultures may not be as direct and feel as comfortable as jumping in as some other cultures. One thing you could do is reach out to people and say, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to get more participation in our meetings. What are your ideas? How do you feel if I call on you in a meeting? Would you prefer not, or would you actually like me to do that, because that spares you from trying to jump in over others who are speaking? So that's getting a little bit granular, but there are a number of tips, techniques that you can use. And I think it depends on the situation. It depends on the culture of the team. Unless, of course, you want to change the culture of the team, which is certainly possible. You may see that people show up differently online. Your team culture may change during this period. Be interesting to pay attention to that. And maybe that's a great way to end one of your team meetings. Step back and say, let's evaluate, how are we doing as a virtual team? What should we do better? What are you hearing from other people, your friends at other companies? How are they coming together in a different way? And should we just try this? What do we have to lose? I think we talk a lot in different organizations about innovation and how important it is to try new things, to be creative. But honestly, sometimes we're not given that permission. There's potential for some failure there. So is this a safe spot that you can create where people can try something new? And if it lands not so great, we tried. Otherwise, you might come up with something new that you never would have tried outside of our current circumstances. So I will stop right there. I could go on for more, but I'll check in with you, Lisa, and see if you've got anything else.
Yeah, I have just one last question for you. I think it's a popular one for those with children at home. We have one participant who says that they have worked remotely the last 5 years, and they're on a large team where they all work remotely. One
Mhm.
of the new challenges they're seeing is that about 50% of the employees are now working full-time from home with 1 to 3 kiddos who they are also caring for and homeschooling. So do you have any tips for navigating that
Mm.
experience?
I wish I had a clear and easy answer. I think we're learning this as we go. Um, While I was listening to the question, you probably heard the neighbor's dogs barking outside my window. And, these things will happen. And one thing that I've been very interested in seeing is how people are willing to give each other, a break when a cat wanders into the camera or, you hear a child. I think longer term, though, it is a situation that needs more discussion. So interestingly, the companies that I have worked for have had strict, remote policies, strict in the sense of it is not intended to overlap with childcare. Now, again, this is pre-school closure, pre-stay at home, pre-pandemic. Um, but it will be interesting to see once things open up again, how comfortable we are with some of these new options. And will there be assumptions made, either assumptions by the workers or by the employers, on where we can loosen things up a little bit with regard to co-locating in your office with your children as well? I think it's a sticky conversation that needs more discussion. I think right now everybody needs, like, one of the strategies was be kind to yourself. Don't make too many excuses. But I think we all have a lot of excuses at this moment. We're carrying a lot on our shoulders, and if we can laugh at what's going on, the humor is good. As I said, it's contagious. We have to understand that we're making the best of the times. Some people did not want to work remotely. Some people did not want schools to close. We didn't have a choice. In other times, people could think about negotiating a work from home arrangement, and they would take into account these different considerations. So, as I said, I think it's going to be interesting from not only a personal, but a societal and an employer legal perspective, how we start to structure some of these work at home arrangements. And it goes back to that question that I posed at the end, one of the bigger questions. How can you get your fingers in this discussion, this bigger discussion of where we go next? And I think that sounds like it could be very exciting.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much, Karen, for your time and your useful information. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending a link to the webinar recording in a couple of days. On the slide presented, you'll find the list of upcoming webinars within this series, Adaptive and Thrive in Changing Times. And you can also visit our website to register for these upcoming webinars. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Take care, stay safe, and have a wonderful afternoon.